Welcome to the Storage Leadership Session, where today we're going to talk about how you can innovate faster with applications on AWS storage. My name is Mylon Thompson-Bukovic, and I'm the Vice President of S3, EBS, and Glacier at AWS. Today, I will be talking about how we've been expanding the capabilities of our AWS storage portfolio this year, as well as the latest releases. I'll also spend time walking through common customer design patterns that we've observed play out worldwide across different industries. But first, I wanted to start by saying thank you for trusting us with your storage. As these customers and many others have discovered, data is the catalyst for the next idea that transforms your business. According to IDC, the amount of digital data is growing at 40% every year. In fact, the amount of data created over the next 3 years will be more than the data created over the past 30 years. We know, and our AWS storage partners know, that on-premises storage appliances simply can't keep up with that type of growth and the innovation that's happening on top of it. As our customers and our storage partners have found, the only way to manage for that rate of growth and the innovation you need is to put your data in the AWS cloud. To help you with that, we have a wide variety of storage partners who can help you migrate your data into the cloud and adopt these new design patterns. We have everything from technology partners who help transform your infrastructure to the consulting partners who help you modernize your architecture and optimize your business. Our partners, like our storage services, are here to help you not only store but unlock value from your data. Over 90% of our roadmap comes from requests from our customers. So what you're going to hear today is a direct result of learning from a very large customer base. In the Gartner 2020 Magic Quadrant for Cloud Infrastructure and Platform Services, AWS continues to be in the top leader position for the 10th consecutive year. That's because we continue to extend the breadth of our portfolio and deepen the capabilities within it and innovate at a pace that no other storage provider can offer. AWS is also leading in the area of cold storage. That's because when we think of archive storage, we don't think about storage that's locked away in a closet. When we think about cold storage, we think it's storage with different access patterns that are part of the vast data lakes that our customers are building. That's very different from approaching it as a necessary insurance policy or a compliance retention tool. It means we build it differently. With AWS Cloud Storage, data isn't archived and hard to reach. It's just not in use at the moment. That's why in the first IDC MarketScape assessment of public cloud cold storage providers, AWS has been named a leader. And not just a leader very much in the forefront. IDC points out that AWS makes it cost-effective to save data over the long term and capitalize on undiscovered value in the future. In AWS storage, we believe that data matters. And we have seen many times when the data that a customer stored based on existing data policies ended up being pivotal in a new application that was able to tap into that data's value. The truth is that today, every business is a data business. Data powers decisions, and there's no safer, better place to put your data than AWS storage. I want to start first from the fundamentals. At AWS, we're building the storage infrastructure foundation, designed from the ground up for the best security, availability, durability, and performance. We think of that as table stakes across all our storage services. We build our storage to be rock solid on table stakes because we understand that is the basis of trust in our services. On top of those table stakes, we focus on how that storage can accelerate your application development. How can we make it easier for your applications to add and access storage? And we also focus on how you can economically grow your data by using the right storage that is the most cost-effective for your business. We have customers that span from storing a terabyte to multiple exabytes. We want to reduce the management complexity for understanding what we think of as your data estate, no matter what the size. And we want to make it really easy for you to unlock your data for very common use cases of analytics and machine learning. Your data powers the applications of today and tomorrow. And the first step on this journey is to understand the AWS storage portfolio. AWS provides the most complete cloud storage portfolio with the deepest functionality, unmatched security, reliability, cost, performance, and data protection. That spans object storage, where you can put your unstructured data, your semi-structured data, and some forms of structured data like Parquet into S3. Amazon FSx for Lustre, which lets you tap into hundreds of gigabytes per second of throughput and millions of IOPS per second at sub-millisecond latencies. And you can reduce cost by moving your on-premises NAS workloads to FSx for Windows File Server. We also have Amazon EFS serverless shared file storage with its deep AWS Lambda and Fargate integrations, or Amazon EBS, which offers the highest performance block storage with the highest storage capacity, IOPS, and throughput among any major cloud vendor. Not only do our services let customers avoid data center capital acquisition costs, that operational overhead and scalability challenges, but they also offer the simplicity of the cloud with a click or two of your mouse or making a few API calls to scale elastically. It's not just those core storage building blocks. We offer a broad-based backup service called AWS Backup that lets you manage your data redundancy in a policy-driven way, as well as the most options for getting your data in and out of our storage services with our transfer family. I wanted to introduce you to the two newest members of the AWS storage portfolio, launched just this year. In June, we launched AWS Snowcone. It's the smallest member of the Snow family Edge devices. Snowcone is as small as a tissue box. It weighs in at 4.5 pounds with 8 terabytes of usable storage. It is ruggedized, secure, and purpose-built for use outside of a traditional data center. You can use it in backpacks of first responders or for IoT or even drone use cases. And you can execute compute applications at the edge with it, shipping the device with data to AWS, or you can simply transfer your data online with AWS Data Sync. In September, we launched Amazon S3 on Outposts. It delivers object storage to your on-premises AWS Outposts to meet local data processing and data residency needs. Using the S3 APIs and features, S3 on Outposts makes it easy to store, secure, tag, retrieve, and control access to the data on your outposts. It's the same S3 APIs, and it's designed to durably and redundantly store data across multiple devices on your outposts. Those are two new services that we've added in 2020. We've also invested deeply in the existing portfolio as well. The best place is to start with Amazon EBS. We have made significant changes across all of our block volumes this year. To set context on EBS, we think of block storage as foundational. It's different from object storage. Block storage doesn't use metadata to store and retrieve data like an object store, nor does it need to read or write an entire file during each transaction. So the read and write times for block storage are really fast. EBS volumes attach to your EC2 instances, which means they persist data independently from the life of your instance. And so EBS is pretty familiar to many EC2 customers today. And I think you'll be excited to know that we've made significant improvements to cost and functionality across all of our volume types. So I want to start first by explaining our different volume types and which applications are used with which volume type. Let's start first with general purpose SSD volumes. These are great for the majority of workloads, including transactional workloads, low latency interactive apps, and boot volumes. We have provisioned IOPS SSD volumes, which are purpose-built for I/O intensive workloads that need consistent and high-performance block storage. Then we have two different volume types that are HDD-based, which means they're lower cost and they're built for different type of workloads. Our throughput-optimized HDD volume are ideal for those big data and analytics workloads that need consistent high throughput and have large data sets and large I/O sizes. Our cheapest EBS volume is the cold HDD SC1 volume, and that is built for lower economic block storage that's designed for throughput-oriented workloads for data that's just not very often accessed. So let's talk a little bit about general purpose SSD. We launched GP2 in 2014, and it very quickly became our most popular volume type. It's used for virtual desktops, databases, dev test environments, and much more. Customers loved the simplicity of buying storage capacity and getting throughput and IOPS included with it. But they didn't really like how you had to buy more storage capacity to get more performance. It meant that sometimes customers were paying for more storage than they needed in order to get the performance they wanted. We wanted to create a way to decouple IOPS performance from storage capacity. So I'm pleased that Andy announced earlier today GP3 volumes for EBS, our newest generation of general purpose volume that is available today. GP3 volumes deliver 4 times higher peak throughput than GP2 at 1,000 megabytes per second per volume, and now include a baseline of 3,000 IOPS for each volume. So if you're fine with your storage capacity, but simply just need a little more performance to go with it, with GP3, you can simply right-click in the console and modify the volume to provision the IOPS or throughput you need without having to add more storage capacity. That means customers can save cost by provisioning not just the IOPS and throughputs or the storage they need. And we reduce the price per gigabyte of GP3 storage by 20%. This is an amazing combination of price, flexibility, and performance configuration, and just raw performance for your boot or data volumes. Now, we think customers will love GP3, but there are some workloads, like clustered databases, where customers need even more IOPS than they can get with GP3. That is why we created our provisioned IOPS volume type. A few months ago, we also launched IO2, our latest generation of provisioned IOPS SSD volumes. When we launched IO2, customers were pretty excited because it delivers 4 times more IOPS than our general purpose volumes, and they're ideal for performance-intensive business-critical applications like SAP HANA, Microsoft SQL Server, and Oracle databases. But what customers told us is that while they love that performance, they're also incredibly excited that IO2 is our first EBS volume with a design for 5 nines of durability. That's 100 times more than IO1 volumes. And when we launched IO2 in August of this year, we kept the same price as IO1, even though we had more durability and a 10 times higher IOPS to storage ratio. I'm excited to introduce even more cost savings for our IO2 customers. I'd like to introduce tiered pricing for IO2 volumes. Previously, all the provisioned IOPS on a volume were charged at a single rate. Now, with the new tiered pricing structure, the first 32,000 IOPS provisioned on a volume are charged at the current base rate, which is 6.5 cents per provisioned IOPS per month. The second tier, between 32,001 and 64,000 IOPS, is charged at a 30% lower rate, 4.6 cents per provisioned IOPS month, and any IOPS provisioned over 64,000 IOPS will be charged at a further 30% lower rate than the second tier, so 3.2 cents per provisioned IOPS per month. That means we're giving incremental 30% discounts per volume tier of IOPS. Now, we've done a lot on price, but our innovation curve for IO2 extends beyond just lowering cost for customers. We're also innovating on capabilities as well. We're happy to introduce this week Amazon EBS multi-attach capability on IO2 volumes. Multi-attach on IO2 volumes allow a single volume to be concurrently attached to up to 16 AWS Nitro system-based EC2 instances within the same availability zone. Each attached instance has full read and write permission to the shared volume, which makes it easier than ever to achieve higher application availability. With all this innovation on IO2, you can tell we're doing something unique and different with block storage in the cloud. Let's talk a little bit more about where we're going with that. Customers have moved some of their most demanding applications to EBS provisioned IOPS, but there's still applications that even IO2 can't support without having to combine or stripe multiple volumes together. Now, while that's possible to do, and many of our customers do it, it does add management overhead. To run very high performance applications on premises, customers have historically relied on SANs. But SANs are expensive. They have a big fixed price up front, regardless of your utilization, and the minute you exceed your capacity, there's yet another big fixed price cost. Also, SANs are pretty hard to manage yourself. You have to update the hardware and the software as the SAN reaches its end of life, and that upgrading can be very disruptive. You also have to make your SAN fault tolerant across multiple data centers, which adds to that data center cost. So, customers don't like having to manage these SANs or be forced to keep them on premises, but they felt like they had no choice because there isn't block storage with the performance of SAN in the cloud. Well, I'm excited that Andy announced earlier today IO2 Block Express, the first SAN purpose-built for the cloud. IO2 Block Express is a feature in preview for our IO2 volume users. It increases your performance of your IO2 volume by 4 times across your performance dimensions. That means you can now run your most demanding IO-intensive workloads in the cloud, including mission-critical deployments of Oracle, SAP HANA, Microsoft SQL, the list goes on. Whereas you might have to stripe multiple IO2 volumes in the past before to get maximum performance, IO2 Block Express significantly increases the performance of that single IO2 volume. And so now you can get 4 times the IOPS, up to 256,000, 4 times the throughput, 4,000 megabytes per second, and 4 times the capacity of 64 terabytes of IO2 in a single volume. That means 4 times better at the same price. IO2 Block Express gives you that performance of a SAN in the cloud without all the headaches. In minutes, you can scale and pay for just the capacity you need. And you can use EBS snapshots to back up your volumes in S3. No one else has anything that delivers the performance and capacity of IO2 Block Express, and it's available at preview this week at re:Invent. Keep a close eye on what we're doing with IO2. As you can see, we're investing heavily in it and plan to release support for additional SAN features, including multi-attach, IO fencing, fast snapshot restore, and elastic volumes. So, We have made EBS the highest performing block store in the cloud, but it needs an instance to keep up. So I'm also excited to introduce EC2 R5B, a memory-optimized instance that delivers the highest performance for block storage from a major cloud provider. EC2 R5B, our memory-optimized instance, offers 3 times higher IOPS and throughput over R5 with 7,500 megabytes per second and 260,000 IOPS. Now, with R5B and Block Express together, customers can get the highest performance in the cloud for workloads like high-end analytics, mission-critical databases, and ERP systems in a single instance and a single volume. So as you can tell, this has been a big year for us as we build the first SAN in the cloud. We started by launching our new IO2 volume type in August of this year, and here today we're happy to announce the support for multi-attach and a preview of IO2 Block Express, the highest performing block store in the cloud that can replace many on-premises SANs. We're also excited to add to that our most powerful EBS optimized EC2 instance, R5B, that matches the performance of IO2 Block Express, so you have the pairing that you need for your highest performance workloads. We know our block storage customers care about performance, but they also care about optimizing cost for all of their volumes. We talked about the 20% cost reduction of GP3 storage pricing and the savings customers can get with IO2 tiered pricing. This year, we're lowering the total cost of ownership of all of our volume types in different ways. For example, just last month, we announced a 40% cost reduction for our SC1 cold storage volumes. And we also lowered the minimum size required for both SC1 and ST1 volumes by 75%, from 500 gigabytes to 125 gigabytes. And so in fact, when you take into account the 40% cost reduction on SC1 with this new minimum size reduction, some customers with smaller volumes will see an 85% cost savings on their colder block storage. We're also helping lower the cost through how you manage your snapshots. And we just extended Data Lifecycle Manager to support Amazon Machine Images or AMIs. So you can create policies targeting EC2 instances to create EBS-backed AMIs. Not only can you use policy to create snapshots of AMIs, but you can now automate deleting associated snapshots once an AMI has been deregistered. That type of cost efficiency helps customers manage their data estate economically. Which also leads me to introduce EBS in Compute Optimizer for our SSD volume types. Compute Optimizer will apply insights from millions of workloads to make volume recommendations so you can save time comparing and selecting the optimal EBS volume settings for your workload. With these recommendations, you can easily save costs and increase the performance of your workloads. These recommendations are going to be available to you at no additional charge. And with a click of a button, you can apply the recommendations and just start saving money. As you can tell, 2020 has been a big year for EBS customers. 2 new volume types of GP3 and IO2, powerful new features for IO2, a multi-attach, and a preview of IO2 Block Express, and lower total cost of ownership for all of our volume types. You'll see that same focus on innovation across cost, performance, and capability in our file storage services as well. AWS has the broadest file portfolio in the cloud today, bar none. EFS provides this serverless shared file storage with single-click integration into container services like ECS and EKS, and deep AWS Lambda and Fargate integration to build end-to-end serverless applications. Our Windows File Server file service offers the lowest cost file storage in the cloud for applications that want to use the industry standard SMB protocol. It's built on Windows Server and has the capability and performance that NAS-based applications require. Now, if it's speed you're looking for, FSx for Lustre is purpose-built for processing your data sets, giving you hundreds of gigabytes per second of throughput with sub-millisecond latencies. And it's not just breadth, it's also depth of capabilities that customers like about our file storage services. The way to think about Amazon EFS is that it's simple, set and forget, serverless, shared file storage that's especially well suited for container workloads. Now, containers were originally designed to be stateless and ephemeral, but sometimes you need to share data among concurrent instances. And so our customers love using EFS to persist and share data from AWS containers and serverless applications because there's zero management required. And across this past year, EFS has added integration with all AWS compute models, ECS, Fargate, Lambda, EKS, you name it. And just last month, we integrated EFS into the EC2 console, so you can easily create and attach an EFS file system right in the EC2 launch wizard. That easy integration means you can get up and running on your shared file layer quickly and easily. We've also significantly increased the performance of EFS this year. In April, we raised the read IOPS limit for file systems using general purpose performance mode 5 times, from 7,000 IOPS to 35,000 IOPS. And then in July, we doubled per client throughput from 250 megabytes per second to 500 megabytes per second. EFS is not only faster, but customers pay as little as 2.5 cents per gigabyte month for EFS's infrequent access storage. That is the lowest cost serverless file storage in the cloud. And with EFS, you can even lower your TCO more by using EFS's lifecycle management capability to automatically move files between EFS standard and EFS infrequent access. Now, customers tell us how much they hate NAS sprawl in their data centers. It's expensive, it's hard to maintain, and it grows like crazy. By moving workloads like home directories and content management to the cloud, you are getting rid of operational barriers of managing storage. And with the cloud storage, you get the cost benefits and, most importantly, elasticity. We built Amazon FSx for Windows File Server to make your NAS migration really easy. And when you migrate those on-premises NAS data to a fully managed FSx for Windows File Server, you keep all the same features you're used to having while massively improving scalability, availability, and performance, and you get the elasticity of AWS. We've made major changes to FSx for Windows File Server this year, across performance, management functionality, and cross-service integration. Let's focus a little bit on what customers tell us is the most important factor for many of file storage customers, and that's cost. In 2020, we added an HDD storage option to the existing SSD option that provides the lowest cost Windows file storage in the cloud. It starts at 1.3 cents per gigabyte month. That is lower for many of our customers from what they could achieve in their on-premises environments. But in addition to that, we also turned on data duplication, which typically saves customers another 50% on top of that. Now, cost efficiency is in our DNA here on AWS Storage, and we're constantly looking for ways like this to help customers manage growth with the right economics. Now, we built Amazon FSx for compute-intensive workloads like machine learning and HPC and other high-performance processing. FSx for Lustre offers low sub-millisecond latencies and tens of millions of IOPS. In April, we launched the HDD storage option, which brought our costs down for customers to 2.5 cents per gigabyte month. And just in November, we announced a new live storage scaling feature, so customers can now more easily scale file storage with just a click of the button. Our goal is to make FSx for Lustre the best fit for a variety of workloads with different multiple deployment options and storage types to optimize cost and performance. So, in 2020, we added a new low-cost HDD persistent storage for throughput-intensive workloads. This is a great addition to our existing SSD-based storage option, which really focuses on delivering sub-millisecond latencies. And customers that need storage for temporary processing or IOPS-intensive workloads can also use the Scratch option to easily spin up or spin down workloads at a low price. When you innovate on cost and capability, it becomes easier for customers to store different data sets and more volume. Nowhere is that more true than in Amazon S3. We launched Amazon S3 as the first AWS service in March 2006 on Pi Day, and since then, it has become the storage bedrock for many different types of applications. We now have more than 14 years of experience in building and operating S3 storage at scale. And we have individual customers that are storing multiple exabytes of data on S3. Now, tens of thousands of data lakes are built on Amazon S3 today, and that's growing rapidly because of our unmatched availability, durability, scalability, and other unique capabilities. Now, when customers are building data lakes, they look at the data in their data lakes as multi-tenant data. By that, I mean that customers run different applications against the same data in their data lakes, auditing for compliance, or running analytics, or running prediction models, things like that. What's really interesting is that customers are also using S3 to store a wide variety of data types in their data lake. And that ranges from Parquet files to customer care audio recordings to video imagery. And depending on the application that's using them, these data sets can have very different access patterns. Now, as you know, AWS innovates based on what customers need. S3 Intelligent Tiering is a great example of that, and it's used all the time for data lakes. We built it specifically for storage that has changing access patterns. It is the first storage class that automatically adjusts pricing based on an object's access patterns in a given month. So you can put any data set you want into Intelligent Tiering storage and not think about the access patterns of your storage. You just get the cost savings automatically for infrequently accessed objects in a month. Now, we also know that some of the data in a data lake is known cold data. And so we built S3 Glacier Deep Archive, which is the lowest cost object storage in cloud. It's less than 1/10 cent per gigabyte month, or about $1 a terabyte per month. Now, just a few weeks ago, we brought together the automated savings of S3 Intelligent Tiering and that low cost of cold storage. Now, customers have loved Intelligent Tiering because the storage class monitors your data for you and automatically adjusts the price depending on two pricing tiers, one tier for frequent access and one cost-optimized tier for infrequent access. Now, as of November 9th of this year, you can take advantage of automatic data archiving to two new S3 Intelligent Archival tiers built into the storage class of Archive and Deep Archive. These two new archival tiers offer the same price and performance as S3 Glacier and S3 Glacier Deep Archive, but without tiering fees. Once these different archive tiers are activated, S3 Intelligent Tiering will automatically move objects that have not been accessed for 90 days to the Archive Access tier, and after 180 days to the Deep Archive Access tier, so that customers can save up to 95% on storage for these rarely accessed objects. With these new data archival tiers, you can bring the economics of archival storage automatically into your data lake by using this unique storage class that can't be found anywhere else in cloud storage or on-premises storage. Now, customers store diverse data sets that are used by different applications that can span tens to hundreds of accounts and buckets across multiple regions, and in some cases, thousands of prefixes. Before our launch of S3 Storage Lens a few weeks ago, customers would build custom applications to aggregate data to report on storage growth patterns for the shared data sets in a data lake. We launched Amazon Storage Lens on November 18th to give you organization-wide visibility into your object storage usage with a few clicks in the AWS Management Console. S3 Storage Lens is the first cloud storage analytics solution built natively in S3 to give a single view of object storage usage and activity metrics and trends across tens to hundreds of accounts in an organization, with drill downs to generate insights at the account, bucket, or even prefix level. Storage Lens gives you dashboards with over 30 usage and activity metrics to show storage usage and trends with actionable recommendations. So you can, at a glance, get the answer to questions like, how much of my overall storage increased in the last 90 days, and drill down into questions like, which prefix is growing the fastest out of all of my accounts? Lens also automates finding buckets that have infrequently accessed data and gives recommendations on storage to optimize for cost or improve security. Now, we know that security is job one for our customers as it is for us. So we're excited to announce S3 Bucket Keys, which makes it easier and cheaper than ever to use KMS encryption for every object in your data lake. We know that many of our data lakes have millions or billions of objects that generate large volumes of requests to server-side encryption KMS. So we built S3 Bucket Keys, and now, rather than using an individual KMS key for every object in S3 and making a call to KMS every time a request is made against a KMS encrypted object, KMS will generate a bucket level key that is stored in S3 to create unique data keys for objects in that bucket. That reduces the request cost for KMS-backed server-side encryption by up to 99% and significantly increases performance for server-side encryption using KMS. I am also very excited to introduce S3's strong consistency, and that is strong consistency for every S3 request at no additional cost to you and no changes required for your application. We now have strong read after write and list consistency, and we deliver it with zero trade-offs in performance or regional isolation. That's very different from other cloud providers. As an example, Google offers strong consistency for their object storage, but it's based on Spatter for indexing, which means a single point of failure on a global service. S3 built consistency so we don't trade off on important things like regional isolation because we know how important that availability profile is for our customers. Now that S3 is strongly consistent, it means that you can take any extra infrastructure that you had built to track object consistency and save some money by not needing that anymore. And it's overall going to simplify the migration of your analytics workloads like Hadoop from on-premises to S3. Now, our innovation doesn't stop with data lakes. We're also continuing to expand the definition of object storage for any type of data stored in the cloud. I'm excited to introduce multi-destination support in Amazon S3 replication. Customers use S3 replication today to create a copy of their data in another bucket within the same AWS region or in a different region. They do this for a bunch of different reasons that range from backups to compliance requirements to low latency performance. And now, with multi-destination support, our customers can automatically replicate their storage to multiple buckets at the same time, whether it's multiple buckets in the same region or in different AWS regions. So if your team is collaborating across different geographies or your compliance requires a replica of data in 3 different parts of the world, you can set up an S3 replication policy to replicate data automatically from, say, a bucket in our Oregon region to different buckets in our Dublin, Singapore, and Brazil regions. And just like you can do today, you can pick any storage class, including our low-cost archival storage of Deep Archive, for the data stored in those other regions. I'm also excited to let you know that soon we will be announcing support for S3 for AWS Private Link. The team is working very hard on this right now because we've heard from many customers that they want to connect their applications privately from on-premises to S3 without using public IP or proxy servers in their VPC. And so when we launch S3 for AWS Private Link, which is coming very soon, you will be able to create a direct private connection from S3 to on-premises or in AWS using interface endpoints in your VPC. That simplifies your network architecture by eliminating the need to use public IPs, configure firewall rules, or configure an internet gateway to access S3 from on-premises. S3 has more than 14 years experience storing your data at scale. But as you can tell, our pace of innovation hasn't slowed down a bit. Let's dig into some of our newer services and see how that pace of innovation applies to them as well. Now, less than 2 years ago, we launched AWS Backup to help modernize backup and compliance solutions at scale. And we have been very busy expanding the definition of backup based on what we heard from customers. Customers use AWS Backup as a policy-driven way to protect, govern, and manage your different AWS data for compliance. Now, AWS Backup automates copying that secondary data across accounts and regions. These policies give a single view for surveying your backup estate and has real-time monitoring and auditor-ready reporting. Now, just recently in November, we launched Cross-Account Backup, which lets you designate a central backup account for all of your organization's backup and fan them in for greater control. You can also fan out your backups from one AWS account to another for greater protection against ransomware and deletion. We're going to continue to expand beyond the 7 services that AWS Backup supports. And just in November of this year, AWS Backup added support for our managed file services, Amazon FSx for Windows and FSx for Lustre. Now, as you can tell, we have been very busy this year expanding both the breadth of the AWS storage portfolio and the depth of capabilities for each of our storage services. Let's take a look now at how our customers are using AWS storage and what we're seeing as emerging design patterns. Our customers know that the decisions about data that you make today will shape the applications of tomorrow. That is because data is the catalyst for the next idea that transforms your business. Now, our customers take different approaches depending on how they plan to use the storage with their applications. Let's talk first about one pattern we're seeing where customers migrate existing applications to the cloud to perfect their punch. Now, I have been practicing martial arts and boxing for a long time now. And if there's one thing you work on in a fighting sport, it's perfecting your punch. In boxing, that means you work on a punch or a combination over and over again to just make it land perfectly. Now, you might perfect your technique or work on increasing your speed, but at the end of the day, the most important thing is to make sure that you nail that particular punch or sequence. That mindset is similar for many of our customers who choose to move an existing application or storage into the cloud. They want to perfect their punch with that one workload, getting the benefits of the cloud pay-as-you-go model and depth and breadth of our cloud platform with little to no change to their application. For those customers, the migration of an existing application to the cloud as is, or little change at all, is about perfecting a move. It's interesting. When we talk to customers about moving to the cloud, that conversation often starts with cost. And when you can trade capital expense for variable expense and only pay for IT as you use it, the economics of that model just makes sense. Dow Jones has estimated that migrating its data centers to AWS will contribute to a global savings for them of over $100 million in infrastructure costs. But really, the big benefit that customers realize when they move to cloud computing is agility. It's a company's ability to very quickly develop and roll out new applications that respond to the needs of the business. AWS storage gives you the ability to spin up petabytes of storage in minutes, but also use it in ways that customers hadn't been able to do when data was locked away in legacy on-premises storage appliances and tied to a single application. That agility that you get with AWS storage is a game changer for our customers. Here are a couple examples of how customers perfected their punch for an existing application using our AWS storage services. Equifax is one of 3 largest consumer credit reporting agencies in the US, and they migrated 100 terabytes of block storage to Amazon EBS. And when they did that, they increased their performance rates by 300% compared to their on-premises storage. They were also able to scale more easily to support the growth of their business, all without making significant changes to their application. Infor delivers industry-specific multi-tenant cloud ERP to customers. They want to keep using SMB with their application set, so they migrated their file shares to Amazon FSx for Windows File Server and were able to reduce storage costs by 50% and improve application performance by as much as 80%. Now, to help customers migrate their data to the cloud, we built the broadest range of services and capabilities for you to use. For customers who have hybrid cloud storage, they use AWS Storage Gateway, which connects and extends an on-premises environment to AWS storage in a region. Now, customers use Storage Gateway for moving backups to the cloud, or they use on-premises file shares that are backed by cloud storage, and they have this low latency access to data in AWS for those on-premises applications. Now, for offline data transfer, we offer the AWS Snow family, which includes AWS Snow Cone, our latest edition, AWS Snowball, and AWS Snowmobile. Now, Snow Cone and Snowball are purpose-built for use in edge locations where you just don't have that much network capacity. AWS Snowmobile is an exabyte-sized data transfer service used to move massive amounts of data to the cloud or even complete a data center migration. Now, if you're looking to transfer data online, we talked about DataSync earlier. DataSync is this online transfer service that simplifies and automates and speeds up moving data between on-premises storage systems and AWS storage services, as well as between AWS storage services. We know that your customer environments are complex, and that's why we built the breadth of this portfolio for data movement and migration. But we're also working to continue to deepen the capabilities within each of those services. We built the AWS Transfer family to provide fully managed support for file transfers in and out of S3. And at reInvent 2018, a couple years ago, we launched AWS Transfer for SFTP, which has been a very popular service. It's SFTP without having to manage any servers. Customers have really liked that fully managed option for FTP-based storage, and so to help customers migrate more file transfer workloads, this year we launched AWS Transfer for FTPS and for FTP. Now, I talked about how we launched AWS Snow Cone in June. Snow Cone comes pre-installed with DataSync on your Snow Cone device, so you can transfer data online and to the cloud without ever needing to ship the device back to AWS for data ingest. We've invested heavily in both performance and security features for AWS Storage Gateway, which customers use all the time in hybrid cloud environments to give on-premises access to AWS cloud storage in our regions. Earlier this year, Storage Gateway increased their performance by 4 times and added support for S3 intelligent tiering. And just last month, we announced the increase of local storage cache by 4 times to 64 terabytes. And we also recently added access-based enumeration for File Gateway, which lets you better protect your sensitive information. This type of innovation makes it easy for you to perfect your punch and take advantage of AWS services to run your existing applications better, faster, and cheaper. But let's talk more about what customers are doing to take advantage of the breadth of AWS storage and the larger AWS platform. Now, in boxing, once you start getting mastery of a specific punch combination, you want to try it out, which you typically do with a sparring partner. And when you're working with a sparring partner, it's like a dialogue where you're closely observing what your opponent is doing and you're adjusting what you're doing as well. You're experimenting with new techniques and coming up with new patterns that'll work in the ring. As our customers gain more familiarity with the cloud, they too are experimenting with new design patterns that weren't really possible on premises. We're seeing a cloud-based architecture evolve that separates compute from storage. That's very different from legacy applications today, where the storage scales with the application itself. When you separate your storage from your compute, you're adding agility into your application development. You can try new things, react quicker, and it completely transforms how you think about developing new applications. I'd like to welcome Bharath Aleti, Director of Product Management for Splunk, to talk about how Splunk adopted this new design pattern to modernize their architecture.
Thanks, Mylan, and thanks to AWS for this opportunity to share Splunk's story on modernizing our platform architecture to manage petabyte-scale data volumes. At our core, Splunk allows organizations to harness the business value of their data by uncovering actionable insights, helping them take actions in real time and drive key business outcomes. Our mission is to remove the barriers between data and action and enable our organizations to thrive in this new data age. One of the things that customers love about Splunk is the flexibility to build queries on the fly without any predetermined structure. This flexibility has helped our customers harness the power of Splunk for various use cases, spanning IT operations, security, DevOps, and many other business processes. A recent analysis has shown that Splunk allows organizations to detect incidents, investigate and respond to them 90% faster, reduce the risk of security breaches by 70%, accelerates product development cycle by 90%, and improves the time to market by as much as 50%. These benefits have been realized by several thousands of organizations. A few years back, one of our customers came to us with a new problem, but it was a good problem to have from a business perspective. They already had a significant amount of data in Splunk, and the data was doubling almost every 6 months, and it was only expected to grow. However, the increasing cost of infrastructure was becoming a major impediment and was holding them back from adding more data into Splunk. At a smaller scale, you can address this problem of growing data volumes by adding nodes. These nodes tend to come with co-located compute and storage. However, at larger data volumes, and if you're already at about 50 to 100 nodes, adding another 50 to 100 nodes is not necessarily a great solution. You can do it the first time and probably a second time, but then soon enough it becomes cost prohibitive. Another insight that we got looking at our Splunk Cloud data is that majority of our Splunk searches are over recent data. Almost more than 90% of the searches were over the last 30 days. So most of this compute, especially when you have a large number of nodes, is not necessarily fully utilized. So we quickly realized that while this model of co-located compute and storage was a good fit, especially when it evolved during the Hadoop era, was a good fit for smaller data volumes, becomes cost prohibitive at larger data volumes. It was apparent that we needed to evolve this model to not only be able to process growing data volumes, but also be more cost effective, as well as provide data high availability, reliability, and durability. Amazon S3 clearly stood out as a very strong choice that met these requirements. In addition, the ease of getting started and the freedom that it gave us to iterate made it the go-to solution. That iterative process led to Splunk Smart Store. Splunk Smart Store, in a nutshell, decouples compute and storage with S3 or the remote storage serving as the permanent data tier. The separation of compute and storage allows compute and storage to be scaled independent of one another, By doing this, we were able to reduce both the storage costs as well as reduce the amount of compute needed. And if we needed more performance, we simply add more compute. And if we needed more storage, we scale out on S3. However, separation of compute and storage itself doesn't solve all problems. Especially, it can introduce delays when you're processing older data sets. To address this issue, Splunk Smart Store uses the storage on the compute nodes as a caching tier. Frequently read data and recently ingested data resides on the storage on those compute nodes. When you're searching for older data sets, those data sets, if they are not in the cache, are fetched from the remote storage tier, thus bringing data closer to the compute on demand. Now, looking at the key customer benefits, reduced cost is definitely a huge win, especially when you're looking at several hundreds of nodes. Our analysis has shown that customers, the cost savings are upwards of 50%. The second key benefit is performance at scale. Splunk Smart Store brings the data closer to compute on demand, thus delivering high performance for both recent as well as older data sets. Splunk Smart Store brings management simplicity and improved uptime with faster recovery from node failures. Since the data is highly available in S3, we can quickly recover from node failures. Another key benefit is the ability to trim down indexers and entire clusters on demand. You can tear down entire clusters and bring them back as needed with the data residing in S3. Now, this is only made possible since S3 serves as the permanent data tier. To summarize, this evolution of our platform architecture with Splunk Smart Store involving separation of compute, leveraging S3 innovation, has helped us both modernize as well as deliver a petabyte scale data to everything Splunk platform. Thank you all for listening in, and now back to Mylan.
Thanks, Bharath. Super interesting to see how Splunk adopted this new design pattern for separating compute and storage for their service. Now, that separation of storage and compute depends on a concept of a shared storage layer. What Splunk did was use S3 for that layer, but we're seeing customers take the same approach using other AWS storage services with, for example, containers and serverless technology. Let's take a look at Asurion, which offers device insurance and warranty service. Their application performs real-time analysis of the customer experience during support calls using machine learning on AWS Lambda. Now, Asurion couldn't easily fit those audio call recordings, which are pretty big, in AWS Lambda temp space, which is really designed for storing code and libraries and not large volumes of data. So what Asurion did is they separated their serverless compute and their storage by using Amazon EFS as shared file storage for the audio files with those ML functions running in AWS Lambda. And so Asurion's ML inference infrastructure can now scale elastically with call volume because they were able to split those storage and compute layers. Toyota Research Institute, or TRI, was able to adopt that same pattern of separating the scaling of different layers in an application by just using one AWS storage service, FSx for Lustre, which has that separation built in. TRI collects and processes large amounts of sensor data from their autonomous vehicle test drives. Each training data set is staged in a file system device and transferred into Amazon S3 before processing on a powerful GPU compute cluster. And so TRI is using FSx for Lustre to speed up their ML model training for their data scientists. And that's because FSx for Lustre integrates with S3. And so that the file system, the Lustre file system, can transparently present an S3 object as a file, and customers can write that changed data back to their S3 data lake. It's a separation of the file system and the storage in S3, but it's managed by FSx for Lustre. And so that means TRI gets the benefit of the high performance of FSx for Lustre, like that sub-millisecond latency, but the data itself is stored in S3, and that is able to scale independently from the file system itself. It's just another example of that same design pattern of scaling different layers independently that we see so many customers adopt, but here it's managed in part of FSx for Lustre. In boxing, you go to the gym to perfect your punch and to help experiment with new ideas. But the game changes when you head into a match. That's when you need to put it all together. How you are attacking and evading when your adrenaline is high, and the situation is constantly shifting. You have to process everything in real time and take advantage of your assets of speed and technique so you can bring your best game to the fight. That's also true for our customers in the cloud. They want to take advantage of the many services across the AWS platform to realize the full benefits of cost and agility and new capabilities for these rapidly growing data sets in file, block, and object storage. Many of our customers put our different data services together as part of their solutions. Discover Financial Services relies heavily on data and analytics, both internally and externally. To replace a group of 8 to 10 different tool sets used by 12 different teams, Discover's technology team built a centralized platform that 85% of their data scientists now use to share code, data, and analytics techniques. Discover did that by using a combination of Amazon EFS and EFS infrequent access storage for home directories and S3 for backups. This has been a huge success for Discover. In a number of cases, they're seeing savings over 50% in storage costs. They were able to cut storage management time by 90%, and they're updating the data platform in hours and not weeks so that their data scientists can focus on what they do, which is focus on insights. Now, it's important to keep in mind that AWS storage is part of the larger platform of AWS. And part of being able to leverage all of your different assets is to be able to look outside of the storage services and take advantage of the many AWS services that integrate with our storage services. For example, Mercado Libre hosts the largest online commerce and payments ecosystem in Latin America. They store all their data in S3. And when Amazon GuardDuty for S3 was launched earlier this year, they adopted it quickly to get that real-time monitoring of access to their data stored in S3. Mercado Libre set up security risk detection with Amazon GuardDuty for S3 across their entire organization with a single click. Now, GuardDuty for S3 is analyzing over 36,000 Amazon S3 access events every second for security risks, and at a 79% lower cost than if you're simply doing the same thing using log collection with AWS CloudTrail. When you have the breadth and depth of not just AWS storage, but the larger AWS platform, it really transforms how you can put it all together to invent those new experiences for your application. Storage starts with what we think of as table stakes. We engineer for the best security, availability, durability, and performance, bar none, in the cloud or on-premises space. Across all of our storage services, we also think deeply about the areas of cost, management at scale, integration for applications and between services, and data protection. That applies to each of our building blocks of file, block, and object. We're also committed to meeting customers where they are and their applications are, whether that's a hybrid environment between on-premises and AWS cloud, the remote edge, or AWS regions. And we're excited to see how many customers all over the world are taking advantage of our AWS storage services to migrate, modernize, and optimize their applications. Data has gravity. And we're seeing every day how storage provides the bedrock for innovation in machine learning, analytics, and many other applications. We're excited about the journey ahead and how we're creating with you, our customers, this next generation experience for cloud storage at scale.